I consider the greatest accomplishment while I was mayor to be our work to improve the DC school system and the results that we effectuated. The big picture is obvious. We took over the school system. We made really drastic, hard-charging decisions. The results, I think most people are pretty aware of also. Test score increases, graduation rate improvements, enrollment of the schools going up. In many ways, it is a straightforward tale about what you should do when you run a school system. The news, obviously, is that it just isn't done very much. The politics is why it's not done very much, despite the fact it's so needed. Well, I think the answer is yes. I do find it true that the more aggressive the change, the more pronounced the resistance. I am one of those people who believes that governments have grown too big, that their size is too self-serving, and that there are a lot of rules that have been set up to allow the government to just continue working rather than to provide services to people. It's a very funny thing, and I think mayors like me, governors like me, think that we should really, that service delivery justifies the means. From just a results standpoint, which is, my barometer for whether I think something's successful, I would say I can't imagine us doing anything more, given the pushback and obstacles we faced. Now we absolutely could have done more, but the people who we would need to allow us to do more didn't even want us to get done as much as we got done. Now, from a political standpoint, I would not say that we were a great success, so to speak, in a pure politics standpoint. And therein lies the discussion. Therein lies the interest from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Is there a way to actually provide the results and get the politics right, or does one sacrifice the other? I think that what we're doing in D.C. is a national model, in that I don't think that there's any complex way to either run a school system or fix a broken school system. And I'll talk about this a little bit tonight. I actually think that the more simple you make it, the better education is going to be. I think that to the extent you have a very qualified teacher in front of a group of students, whatever kind of students they are, with the right amount of materials, I think that's all you need. I think everything else, even the principal in some way, but certainly, the associate superintendents and the superintendent and the mayors and the school board, all of that stuff is not important in running in educating children. Michelle said this in the Wall Street Journal article. I thought it was very profound. Is that so? What would have been great is if we could have been able to get the people who we were most trying to help to be at the front of the reform movement. If we could have gotten them to be at the front of the changes we were trying to make. Instead, what happened was we ended up pulling people along, and in some ways even pulling them along against their will, despite the fact all objective, factual information showed that in the neighborhoods where we were getting some resistance, the need for reform was the greatest. I prefer to put more blame on my team and say that we didn't do a good enough job explaining it. And Michelle said that in the same article I just referenced. We didn't do a good job explaining the decisions we were making, why we were making them, and then also that if you want the school system fixed, there really is no other way to do it, unless you're willing to wait 30 years. You know what I mean? And that all got lost in translation. Yeah, there are probably some really good answers to this question, because reporting can only go to the kind of juiciest topic. There, for instance, is really widespread neglect and abuse in the homes and communities in the inner city. I don't think that gets discussed enough or a lot. Just so many different things dealing with the cycle of poverty itself. I don't think it really gets the attention it deserves. It's, in the cycle, there's different things from child welfare and child abuse to the lack of parent involvement, etc. I'm not sure if there's just one thing that got underreported. Maybe the whole cycle of poverty itself. Yeah, so they have only given me, one course to teach, and I'll only get to go there like 4 or 5 times a year. But we're going to focus in on the issue we discussed earlier in this interview, and that is that thin line between engagement, involvement, consultation, and on one side, and then on the other side, slowing down decision making, watering down decision making, being counterproductive and not results oriented. How do you get that perfect balance? Well, it depends. I mean, there's international, there's a national. I can best speak to local, municipal / urban, and in that context, I really believe that the die is cast. I believe that the next generation of leaders will follow on the most current generation of leaders, your Gavin Newsoms, your Cory Bookers, who are just finding unbelievably exciting, fresh, technologically sound, business-like ways to go about the provision of services. And those leaders will, less than my generation, but still find opposition from the quote-unquote old guard, from the special interests, from people who are resistant to change, which is a human nature tendency I've found. And relevant to tonight's discussion, they really will find the greatest obstacles in education. It's, there can really be great unanimity in so many different things, from transportation to policing to other things that are important to run a city. But on education, there really is a pretty great divide. It's one of the reasons I think that there's not going to be a solution to it without a little bit of bloodshed.